Thank you, and welcome back. I've got 2 microphones on now, and hopefully you'll hear me better. Little lady with a little voice, but I'm trying. So now we're going to be looking at the ultimate first aid kit. The first aid kit's important, and what I did with my kids, we bought little lunch boxes, with clip-top lids, and they put all their own little bits and pieces in. But a very important part of the first aid kit was cayenne pepper. Cayenne pepper's a remarkable herb, and I mentioned in my last class the book Back to Eden by Jethro Kloss. Half a page to every herb, 10 pages to cayenne pepper. He likes it. Now, the reason why cayenne pepper is such a remarkable herb is it's a blood stimulant. And anything that stimulates blood is stimulating what Leviticus 17:11 says, the life of the flesh is in the blood. So it's stimulating blood to the area. And as I showed you in my last class, when you got more blood, you got more oxygen, you got more nutrients, you got more water, more waste has been taken away, and also that movement of blood stimulates the bone marrow to even make more red and white blood cells. And that's one of the beauties of those contrast baths that I touched on, the alternating hot and colds. So cayenne pepper is an important part of the first aid kit. I saw a lady, I experienced it at our retreat a few years ago now, she was having a heart attack. And I came running down, that's why it's important to keep fit, be able to run there very quickly. And this lady's lying on the ground, she's about 80, and it was in the middle of a cooking class, and one of the other guests was holding a pulse. He said, the pulse is weak. And her face was white, she was half conscious, so I said to my offsider, quick, cayenne pepper, and I don't know how much I got, it's quick, maybe half a teaspoon, put it in her mouth, and gave her a little bit of water. She was half conscious, she could drink, and the guy holding the pulse, within about 2 minutes, he yelled out, the pulse is strong. And all the colour came back to her face, and she sat up and said, what happened? Everyone in the room's going, whoa. I said, no, it's not me, it's the cayenne pepper. We sold out of cayenne pepper that program. Everyone took cayenne pepper. What did the cayenne pepper do? The cayenne pepper has some remarkable effects on the body. It can thin the blood. Best blood thinner I know. Forget aspirin. Do you want to know the side effects of aspirin? Stomach bleed, brain bleed, and eye bleed. And if there is a stomach bleed or an eye bleed or a brain bleed, guess what cayenne pepper will do? It'll seal the bleeding vessels. But it thins the blood and it acts as a vasodilator. What's a vasodilator? A vasodilator is something that will cause the blood vessels to open, and when the blood vessels open, you get a better delivery of blood through the body. So this is why within 2 minutes of putting that cayenne pepper in her mouth, you see already the mucous membranes in the mouth, the blood vessels under the tongue, they're already taking it in. And it takes 1 minute for 1 drop of blood to go around your whole body. So that's why within 2 minutes, the guy yelled out, the pulse is strong. And all the colour came back to her face because those little micro capillaries, those tiny little ones, they all opened with this more effective rush of blood through the whole body. Something else that cayenne pepper does, by the way, It can repair the vascular system. What's the vascular system? The vascular system is your blood capillary networks. In other words, it can repair the walls of the vascular system. And that's really good news. So as part of your first aid kit, if someone has a cayenne pepper, then it'll help to bring them out of a heart attack. And if someone has a panic attack. So this was interesting because once all that'll settle down and they took her back to her room, by the way, her husband said she's had 3 this year. This is the 3rd one. The previous 2, they rang emergency, the ambulance came and they gave her drugs and took her to hospital, and she was in hospital for a few days and sent her home. Oh, how easy to just give someone cayenne pepper. And remember what the good doctor said in Jethro Kloss's book, Back to Eden, it's impossible to abuse cayenne pepper. Do you know what that means? I could have given her 3 teaspoons. Half a teaspoon did it. But when everything had settled down, one of the staff came to me and said, one of the guests is having a panic attack in a room, because she was prone to panic attacks, and I said, get the cayenne pepper. And she was in the room going, ah, ah. And we put the cayenne pepper in her mouth, gave her water, and that gave her a little bit of a shock. Then I took her hand and took her outside and showed her how to calm herself down. Just calm herself down. And you can calm down using breath work. Our nose was designed to breathe. Mouth is for speaking, singing, talking, eating, drinking, but nose, and nose alone is for breathing. In and out through the nose. When you breathe in and out through the nose and use your abdominal muscles, so you're using your diaphragm, abdominal muscles in the breathing process, breathing slow and deep like that, it stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, and the parasympathetic nervous system is your peaceful, calming nervous system. Whereas when we went into the room, the lady's breathing like this. Breathing like that stimulates your sympathetic nervous system, and your sympathetic nervous system is your fight and your flight system. So just changing the breath, just changing the way that you breathe can have a calming effect. So that's just a piece of information. Of course, you can't put that into your first aid kit, but that information certainly helps. Because when there's a crisis, when something is being burnt or someone's fallen out of a tree, or it's so important to get the stress levels down. So cayenne pepper can get someone out of shock. Cayenne pepper can calm someone if they're having a panic attack. It can help to bring someone out of a heart attack. So it's a remarkable herb. But it can also be used externally. And it can be used if there's a cut, because it will seal bleeding blood vessels. I remember being in a meeting once, and my son Peter must have been about 10 at the time. No, he was probably 12. He's at the window going like this, and I said to my daughter Jess, "Oh, go and see what's wrong with Peter." So she ran out, and I didn't. No more kids, and I thought everything was fine. And then I went back up to the house, and there I saw my younger son, William, who was 10, tear-stained face and hand here that had blood on it and a big lump of cayenne pepper on top. And I said, "What's going on?" And apparently Peter had a machete and he was cutting down the old banana. And William thought he'd finished in that area and put his hand in just as the machete came down. So I went across 3 fingers, but isn't that interesting? The kids knew what to do. So Jessica puts cayenne pepper into the cut fingers, and some would say, "Doesn't that hurt?" Well, it's already hurting. So it doesn't actually hurt much more. And they found something that really helped William was a fruit juice ice block out of the freezer. He was sucking on that when I got there. Some would say, didn't it need to go to the hospital? Didn't it need to be stitched? You know, there's probably a time for stitching, but, you know, you've got bone right there, so it actually doesn't go very deep. And we just bound that up. And what's very interesting is it cleanses the area too. Now, if there's dirt there, of course you wash it off. But it was a fairly clean cut, and it healed very nicely. We bind it up every day. You bind it up until it's... And sometimes you have to put like a piece of wood there, so you've got like a splint, because every time you'd bend it, it'd open. But the cayenne pepper healed that up very nicely. And we also, probably a few years later, we had a Fijian doctor come and work with us at the retreat. And this is when we're now out at Misty Mountain. We're quite remote. And at this point, we were 2 hours from town. And she, as many Fijians do, was barefoot in the kitchen. And someone dropped the blender. Now, the blender's really thick glass, and it's tiled floor, and bits of glass flew up in the air and went into her foot. Now, I've got quite a skinny foot, but she doesn't. She's got a lot more padded foot than me. And I was lecturing at the time, and the staff were like... So I finished the class early, and I went and they said, quick, out on the veranda, she's got two quite deep cuts. And I looked at the foot, and both of the cuts are about you do centimetres, don't you? About 1 centimetre long and quite deep. You could see the fat globules there. So I ran inside, got the cayenne pepper and sprinkled cayenne pepper into the wound. She just threw her head back and started laughing. She'd never seen anything like it. She said, what are you doing? I said, trust me. Now, cayenne pepper also, and this is quite a remarkable property of the cayenne pepper, it's an analgesic. What's an analgesic? An analgesic is a painkiller. So I sprinkled the cayenne pepper in it and we bound it up. And I talked to her the next day and she said, I could not believe what you did. She said, as a medical doctor, I would have stitched that. But she said, here I am. And at that point, we were 2 hours from town. She said, you just sprinkled cayenne pepper and you just bound it up and you just acted as if, well, that's all we need to do. So she said, well, here I am to learn from you. So I did. And what that cayenne pepper did is it drew that wound together. She said, I can't believe it. She said, because I would have stitched that. Now, as I said, if it was 3 inches long and maybe 2 centimetres deep, it's quite possible that maybe stitches may have been necessary. But for a little one like that, and for my son's, the cut on his hand, the cayenne pepper certainly did the trick. And what some people have done is they've put the cayenne pepper into the wound, which was bigger and deeper, and it stopped the bleeding, and then they've gone to emergency to have it stitched. And the nurses are very surprised to see this bright red stuff in the wound. but the bleeding stopped. Yes, it'll tingle and sting when it first goes in, but when that settles down, then it has the analgesic effect. It's like if you have a sore throat and you take cayenne pepper, it really tingles, but when the tingling settles down, the sore throats can sometimes be 50% relief from that, from taking the cayenne pepper. So as an analgesic, it's quite remarkable what it can do. So in the first aid kit, my suggestion is have a little container of cayenne pepper powder, but also have a container of cayenne pepper capsules. So we were helping a man whose hand went through a roller. I never saw him, but his wife contacted me and then he contacted me. I'm in Australia, they're in the US. And the tips of the finger within probably 24 hours are starting to darken. And he went to the doctor, and the doctor wanted to take them off. The doctor said, they're going gangrene, we have to take them off. So they went home and contacted me, and I said, well, I wouldn't. this is what I do. I'd get aloe vera. Aloe vera contains a growth stimulant. And as a growth stimulant, it can stimulate rapid healing in the tissues. And I'd sprinkle a slab of cayenne pepper gel with a slab of aloe vera gel, and then sprinkle cayenne pepper on that and then fold it over the tips. Because cayenne pepper is a blood stimulant. So you put it on that area, it'll pull the blood into the area. Do you know, the good news is he didn't lose the tips of his fingers. There was one part of it that did eventually dry out and fall off, and his fingers don't look exactly like the other fingers, but they healed and he can use them. Often when there's an injury, when the nerves have been cut, the feeling goes. And that's the other thing that cayenne pepper can do. It can bring feeling back into an area. So I'm going to go sideways for a moment and tell you about a couple of places that you can use the cayenne pepper compress, and I'm going to show you how to make the compress. So here is a piece of plastic, and you might fold that cling wrap over a few times to make it usable, or you might just cut up a plastic bag. And the good news today, you can get starch plastic bags that aren't quite as toxic. And what we're doing here is we're making a compress for someone who has cold feet. If they go to the princes, they're given a name. It's called Raynaud's disease, but really is just cold feet. And all cold feet need is to be warmed up. Got that? And you cannot put cold feet into a bucket of hot water. If you put cold feet into a bucket of hot water, you'll damage the tissues. So the only time you can't do that alternating contrast hot water, cold water, hot water, cold water is if the person has no feeling in their feet or if their feet are very cold. You cannot put cold feet into a bucket of hot water. You can put cold feet or feet that have no feeling into warm water, but you can't put it into hot water. You'll damage the tissues. They don't have feelings there. And so what you can do for peripheral neuropathy is a cayenne pepper compress. Now, if you Google neuropathy, it'll say no known cure. But there is. I never say never with what the body can do. Well, why would someone have peripheral neuropathy? Often diabetics have it because of the lack of circulation to the extremities, and it is one of the side effects of chemotherapy. So you have a piece of plastic the size of the foot, and then you get some paper towel and you fold it over in half. So you've got 2 layers of paper towel. So there's the paper towel there. And what we're going to do is we're going to lightly dab the whole area with olive oil. So here's the olive oil, is the yellow. What I usually do is put the olive oil into a little bowl, dab my finger and just go dab, dab, dab. Put my finger in, dab, dab, dab. You can't pour olive oil on it, otherwise you'll get olive oil leaking everywhere, and that's no fun. So here's the olive oil, and there are just little dabs like this of olive oil. And there's a reason for this. We're doing the olive oil because it'll cause the cayenne pepper to stick to the olive oil. Otherwise, the cayenne pepper's just going to fall off. So you just dab, dab, dab the whole area with olive oil, and then you sprinkle cayenne pepper on. And probably per foot you'd do maybe half a teaspoon. And what happens is all of that cayenne pepper sticks to the olive oil so that when you hold it off, it doesn't all fall off. That's the main reason for it. And then you put the foot on it. So here's foot, and the skin goes straight on to that compress. Practice is making perfect. The feet are looking a bit better. So you put it on both feet, and then you just put a sock on, and the person sleeps with that all night. And if someone's got cold feet, by morning their feet are warm. And often that's all you need to do. And I say to them now keep them warm. It's been a cold winter day, and a lady says, my feet are cold. And I said, well, you've got thin sandals on. If I had them on, my feet would be cold. It's a bit of common sense there. But right now my feet have got woolen socks and leather boots on, and my feet are warm. Perfect health requires perfect circulation, and perfect circulation means my whole body's the same temperature. And if it's not, you've got to take steps to make sure it is. It's time to get the polyester out of our homes, out of our wardrobes, because nylon, acrylic and polyester were created in a chemical laboratory. That is enough for me not wanting to touch it. And when I go to New Zealand and when I go to Ireland and Scotland and I hear that the sheep farmers are burning their wool because no one's buying wool anymore. Well, I do. I think everything I've got on's wool. Wool, 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 wool. Because I'm only little and I get cold very easily, but wool keeps me warm. And you can buy soft wool that does not prickle. They keep that for the coats. But for the wool that's touching the body, you'll find that that is soft. And that's why I stress when you're making compresses, it must be natural fibre. Always natural fibre. If someone has peripheral neuropathy, they might need to do this, say, every second or third night. One man who had peripheral neuropathy, after one night with the cayennepeper compresses on both feet, in the morning he said, I've got pins and needles in my feet. Now that's the first sign of life coming back. In fact, this man came to us about 12 years ago, and about 10 years ago I wrote an article in a health magazine, and I called it Feet Coming Back to Life. And I wrote the story of what had happened to this man. He had multiple sclerosis. And when I investigated why, because there's always a reason. So we've always put our detective hats on and find out why are these things so. I was talking to a man in Melbourne one day and I said, what do you do for a job? He said, I'm a private investigator. I said, so am I. We should all be private investigators. So when I wanted to know why this man had this multiple sclerosis, I always look at the teeth first because mercury fillings are a big contributing factor. No mercury fillings. So I investigated further. Then I discovered that he'd bought some land and he wanted to build a house. He wanted a cement slab and then poles and his house would be up. And so they poisoned the ground to kill off all the weeds and everything, but he couldn't afford the slab, so he just built the house. And he used to work under there on his motors and engines barefoot. So he's barefoot on this ground that's been heavily poisoned. And remember, the biggest pores in the whole of your body are on the soles of your feet. So the chemicals came in and they damaged the myelin sheath, which is that little arm that comes out of the nerve cell. That was a big contributing factor to his multiple sclerosis. You see, every case is different. That's why I believe that we all should be our own doctor. It's important to know your history, to document your case, because we are what we are today because of all those bits and pieces that happened to us. You can't change that, but it just explains why this is happening. He told me that when he sleeps at night, it's like he can't feel his feet, but it feels like there are two rocks hanging off the end of his legs. He said it's so hard to sleep. So he put the cayennepeper compresses on the bottom of his feet, and in the morning he was so happy. He said, I slept all night. Now he's not better, but what's his body just said to him? You're on the right track, you're on the right track. So every second night, third night, we did it, and every time we saw a little bit more improvement. So you can also do this while I'm here. You can do this for an underactive thyroid gland. Now, an underactive thyroid gland, hypothyroidism it's often called, you can do this to the thyroid. But if you do it to the thyroid, just do it for a few hours every morning, maybe 3 times a week. And just just pretend those toes aren't there. So you just apply it to the thyroid and wrap it around your neck. Cayenne pepper will wake anything up. So any area that has no feeling, you can apply the cayenne pepper on a compress like this. Obviously, when you make it and when you'll use it, and then it must be discarded. There it is. Sometimes it goes. So that's cayenne pepper. So you can see why it's in your first aid kit, because there are so many things that you can use it for, and some of the things that we talked about you don't necessarily come across, but there are other things that can be used for. So with the man who put his hand through the roller, one thing that he was being very much challenged with, as you can imagine, is pain. So what he started to do, when the pain was intense, he took 2 capsules of cayenne pepper every 2 hours. Now, if it's Tylenol or ibuprofen, what's that, 4-hourly? Well, you could take it hourly if you want. But he said to me, it brought more relief than Tylenol, because it's an analgesic. Is there a limit to how much you can take? Well, what did the good doctor say in Back to Eden? It's impossible to abuse it. So you could take a bucket a day, but I don't know anyone who takes a bucket a day. So it's perfectly safe. But won't it cause a stomach ulcer? I've got some good news. It'll heal it. It'll heal it, because if there's bleeding, it'll constrict those blood vessels and stop the bleeding. If someone has glaucoma is pressure in the eyes. And in my book, Sustain Me, I've got a chapter on the eyes, and I'll also be talking about the eyes tomorrow. I'll be talking about the skin, and in the second class we'll be looking at eyes. We love our eyes, we love being able to see. And people's eyesight are deteriorating too quick today. But one of the conditions people have been diagnosed with is glaucoma. That's pressure in the eyes. So there's a herb tea in my book, and I'll be defining it more tomorrow when I talk about the eyes. It's eyebright and golden seal. And you can use that for all eye complaints, but you put a pinch of cayenne pepper in it. And then you strain it, and you can wash the eye with it. Yes, there's a bit of a murmur there. Won't it sting? Do you know, there might be a little tingle, and if it's too much of a tingle for you, dilute it. Dilute it until it's not tingling so much. But the reason why it's good for glaucoma is it releases the pressure by, remember what it does? It's a vasodilator. It's opening those blood vessels, which means it takes pressure off. And one man said to me, well, the drops from the doctor sting, so what's the difference? That is true. So it can also be used for an eye wash. My son William, he's a landscaper, and he was exposed to mould. And ever after, he'd get bleeding noses. And he was up in altitude, I think they were skiing. Yes, snow does fall in Australia on some of the mountaintops. And he got a really bad blood nose with the altitude. And his friends took him straight to hospital. And he thought to himself, oh, this will be unique, because he hadn't done this before. But that's what they all reckon, you go. And you know what the doctor did? He put his head against the wall and he just forced a rod up his nose. William said he just yelled. It was the most painful thing he's ever experienced. And when the rod went up, it expanded, and that, of course, stopped the blood nose. So I don't think William will ever go there again. And the next time he got a blood nose, I said, try cayenne pepper. And I thought, he'll try it because nothing could be as bad as the rod going up the nose. And yes, eyes are watering, but hey, in a crisis, you'll do things like this. And you know what else he did? He stood on ice. And he said the standing on the ice and the cayenne pepper sniffing up there, it stopped it. Yes, meantime, he went on the antifungal diet that's in Self-Heal by Design, and little by little, he got that yeast presence out of his body. And so, how old's William now? He's 38, so that happened when he was about 19, so he doesn't have a problem anymore. But he said what was interesting as a landscaper, he was up in Brisbane, the northern part of Australia. There was a lot of rain, and when the rain stopped, they went in to get, I don't know if we call it a whippersnipper. In America, they call it a weed cutter. It's a long stalk, and you pull a thing and it cuts the weeds, yeah, one of those. Well, he went in to get the whippersnipper, and he brought it out, and he dropped it. It was covered in mould. And the next minute, his nose started to bleed. So for him, we had to get those yeast levels down in his body, which we eventually did. But what do you do when there's bleeding noses? So not everyone wants to sniff cayenne pepper up their nose, but you can put ice on here. Ice will slow and constrict. And by the way, while we're there with ice, and of course you can't have ice in a first aid kit, but for a crisis in your home, ice can do so much. That's why every freezer should have ice. It's one of the best anti-inflammatory that there is. And on the side of the football field, they don't have buckets of hot water, do they? They have buckets of ice. Because if there's an injury, that ice can get that inflammation down. And if it's an overactive thyroid gland, ice it. That'll slow it down. So how you ice it is you might apply the ice for 7 seconds, off for 7 seconds. Ice for 7 seconds, off for 7 seconds. Ice for 7. And you keep doing that until the area is numb. And of course that's the other beauty of ice, that eventually it numbs the area. So obviously if you're camping, maybe you will have ice in the esky. Do you call it an esky or a cooler? But remember ice. Ice for injuries is great, just gets that inflammation down. So the cayenne pepper is an important part of the first aid kit, as is charcoal. So charcoal is unique. And the reason why charcoal's unique is that charcoal absorbs. It not only absorbs, but it neutralises poisons. There's nothing else that will do that. It absorbs and neutralises poisons. Now, in our last class, we looked at grated potato and how grated potato can absorb and take waste out of the body, especially if someone's got a wound or trod on a rusty nail. But this is unique in that it not only absorbs, but it also neutralises the poisons. What's that mean? When it comes across poison, it absorbs it and holds it. And that's why in hospitals, in emergency departments, if someone comes in that's overdosed, they'll give them charcoal. Because as soon as the charcoal goes in, it absorbs and it neutralises the poisons, and now it's safe on its journey all through the body until it's out of the body. Now, this ability to do that is called adsorb. Adsorb refers to the fact that charcoal is able to absorb and neutralise poison. In hospitals, they use charcoal to filter blood for dialysis. NASA used charcoal in outer space to filter the air, to filter the water, and some very basic water filters often are just charcoal. Charcoal will absorb and neutralise poison. That's the value of charcoal. And some face masks, when people are dealing with poisonous spills and things, they'll have charcoal in them because charcoal absorbs and neutralises poisons. So knowing that charcoal will absorb and neutralise poison, you can use it externally and you can use it internally. So internally, it's probably been used mostly in the home first aid kit for diarrhoea, for vomiting. And if someone has vomiting and you give them maybe a quarter of a glass of charcoal, it's usually 1 teaspoon to 1 cup of water. It doesn't taste like anything, just tastes like water. And if they vomit again and they vomit up the charcoal, I wouldn't worry about that. Even if it's just down there for 5 minutes, it's still absorbing and neutralising. And eventually they'll be able to, of course, hold it down. In fact, diarrhoea and vomiting, it's been called the express train of waste out of the body. And as one health writer stated, if we didn't vomit, we'd die. So for that to happen, of course, it's not a pleasant experience at all, but the body's doing it for a reason. The body knows what it's doing. It knows how to heal you. And it's very hard when you vomit to say thank you. But I think most people that have vomited, I guess we all have at some time in our life, the relief after that. Because the most discomfort is whatever is in here, whether it's food poisoning or whatever it is. It's the most uncomfortable thing. Don't worry about vomiting. A vomit is great. It's out. The waste is out. I know with my children, if ever they had an upset stomach and I gave them charcoal, once the black came out the other end, they're usually right. And a lot of people travel with charcoal tablets. So as with the cayenne, where I said it's good in the first aid kit to have a little bottle of the cayenne powder and capsules, it's also a good idea with charcoal to have a little container with powder, but also a little container of tablets. I always travel with charcoal tablets. Many people that travel through Asia will take charcoal tablets with them because if ever you get what they call barley belly, that's why they say only drink water out of bottled water. Be careful eating salads. Rice is one of the worst. Rice should be fresh cooked every day. And there's once when I was in Jakarta and I got terrible pain. And it was because I'd been travelling with this couple and we stopped for lunch and it was rice. And it had been sitting in that hot car all morning. Rice deteriorates very, very quickly. In fact, one pathologist said we tested it within 5 hours of being cooked, the rice can start developing mould. That's why I only ever eat rice that's been cooked that day. So it's the only grain really that moulds so quickly. I've had that confirmed too. A pathologist did our program and she said when I was in university, 2 things always tested positive for mould: peanuts and cooked rice. And then we had a lady that worked in a fast food shop. She said when the health department comes into the store, they go straight to the rice. She said it's the first thing they check because it moulds so very easy. So that was the cause of my terribly upset stomach, and I certainly had a lot of charcoal because I was lecturing and I had to lecture, I had to fix this. So charcoal is great for the first aid kit internally, but also externally. Because it absorbs and neutralises poisons, it can be applied to snake bite, bee sting, wasp bite, spider bite. It'll absorb and neutralise a poison. I remember I was gardening one day and we have jumping ants and they sting really badly. And I got a sting. So I ran inside and just grabbed ice. And that felt good. And I'm still gardening with the other hand because I wanted to get this finished. And by the time the ice melted, back again. Did this 3 times, then I thought, right, I've got to stop. I've got to go inside and I'm going to make a charcoal poultice. As soon as I put that charcoal poultice on, the pain went. It's quite incredible because it absorbs and neutralises poison. So what you do in the first aid kit, you have a little bottle. There's your little bottle of charcoal powder, but you also have a little bottle of psyllium husks. And the reason you have psyllium husks is when you mix charcoal and water together, it's like mixing dirt and water together. It doesn't mix very well. But if you do half charcoal and half psyllium, everyone knows psyllium? I think it's called psyllium husks. Anyway, you can put that into your translator in your phone. So the psyllium husks, when you put water with it, it goes like a soft jelly. I mean, you could use chia seeds. You put chia seeds with water, it goes like a soft jelly. But I think it's a waste to do that with chia seeds. They're expensive and I want to eat them. But psyllium husks, it's not an expense. And what you would do is you'd mix half charcoal, half psyllium husks with enough water to make a soft jelly. And when it's just a soft jelly, that can be put on the wound. I mean, if you're going camping in the bush, you might even make up a jar where it's already mixed. So if there's a bee sting, if there's a wasp bite, and you might say to me, Barbara, we don't live in Australia. And I know you hear all terrible things in Australia, but I raised all my children out in the bush and no one got a snake bite. See, when you walk in the bush and there's a snake, they run away. But it's good to know that you can use that. And and that's why also, of course, in your first aid kit, you've got bandages, you've got tape. We've got in Australia a hypoallergic tape. And that's a low allergy tape. I think they made it for people with very sensitive skin. Because Band-Aids, do you have Band-Aids? When you take the Band-Aid off, it rips half your skin off there. But the hypoallergic tape or hypoallergic Band-Aids, they're very gentle on the skin. So I prefer to use them. But I think an important part of the first aid kit, okay, we've got another one here, is, yes, tape, yes, Band-Aids, and I think this is no-brainers. I think we all know that. Band-Aids, and also scissors and tweezers. And I think stretch bandages are also good. So they're all part of it. And cloth squares. And the reason I say cloth squares is because that's what you can make your poultices out of. You could make your, like with a spider bite, you can just put that charcoal gel straight on, but then you'd put a cloth square over that, and then a bit of plastic, and then bandage that on. Otherwise, charcoal gets on everything. You want to sort of contain it. So the cloth squares might be this big. That'll be good for a tiny little spider bite. Some of them might be this big, some of them might be this big, and of course that's the beauty of the scissors. You can cut it. But when someone's hurting, and you've got to deal with it quickly, so that's why you have all of that. That's why you have your first aid kit. It's all ready. It's all there and ready to go. And usually you have water, so to make the poultice you just mix half psyllium, half charcoal, and enough water so it's a soft jelly. So that's for snake bite, spider bite. A friend of mine, her son was bitten by a brown snake, and brown snakes can be deadly. So she immediately put the charcoal on him and gave him charcoal to drink. So it went so absorbed into the bloodstream. And she took him to hospital. She's a medical doctor, but she knew natural remedies. And when they took the poultice off and tested the poultice, it was full of venom. So the poultice had actually pulled it out. So you can't always, test it to see that, but she had. So we've got tape, band-aids. Oh dear, sorry the spelling's not real good there. That should be A-I-D. So band-aids, and we've got cayennepeper in a little container. So we'll make a list of all the things we've got. We've got charcoal in a little container. And we've got psyllium. And the psyllium basically is just your binder for your charcoal. What I think is also important is to have some tea tree essential oil. And the beauty of the tea tree oil is it can be used, like if you're out in the bush and someone's hurt themselves and you wash it and put a little tea tree on it, or you can put tea tree in the water and put it on, so it's like a disinfected if there's a tick bite. That's why if there's a tick bite, you get the tweezers, you put it on the neck of the tick and twist it as you pull, and then you can put tea tree oil straight onto that. So it can be used for that. And iodine. Did you know iodine was used extensively to treat skin problems? I've got a friend who's a surgeon. She said before surgery we always wipe it with iodine before we cut open for surgery. I don't think every surgery does that, but she said that's what we always did. So if there's a graze or a wound, the iodine can be put on that. It was used extensively before antibiotics became so well used. And I think it doesn't hurt to have a little bottle of castor oil. Now the reason why castor oil, and an old bushman told me that, he said whenever he gets anything in his eye, he puts castor oil in it. He said the castor oil seems to surround it and help to pull it out. So the castor oil that can be also in a little bottle. And another essential oil is lavender oil. Lavender essential oil. And one of the nice things about lavender essential oil, it's a calmer. And if someone's been hurt and they're really stressed, you can calm them with lavender oil. The best place to put it is on the temples. Just rub it into the temples. And the beauty of the oils is they don't take up very much room. They're just tiny little bottles that you can put in there. The castor oil can be put in the eye. That's probably the main reason that you would use the castor oil. What about a burn? Best thing for a burn is aloe vera. And I think every home should have a plant of aloe vera. And in my last lecture I showed you how you cut it down the middle, so you're looking at the two halves, and then you place that like a jigsaw wherever the burn is. If you scrape out the gel and put it on and then bandage it up, the edges dry. And then when you try and take it off, the edges have stuck to the skin, and then that can tear the skin. But if you keep the skin intact, it will never tear. But it's not easy when you're camping to have aloe vera, and you may not have aloe vera, but you can add sodium bicarbonate. Sodium bicarbonate, and the other one is Epsom salts. Sodium bicarbonate can be used as a soak. But the Epsom salt is the one that you would use for burns. So this is for burns. Now what some people do is they'll make a little jar of this already. And what I'm about to show you is how you can make saturated Epsom salt solution. Epsom salts is magnesium sulfate, and magnesium is a water-hungry molecule. So when you might get a little jar and put half a cup of water in it and then put a teaspoon of Epsom salts in and mix it around, and it'll all just totally dissolve because the magnesium, it dissolves into the water. And then you put another teaspoon in, mix it around, and it'll probably dissolve. Then you put another half teaspoon in, which will barely dissolve. That's your saturated solution. That's saturated Epsom salts. And for a burn, you would get a cloth and you would dip it in that, and not dripping, but not squeezed out dry, but quite wet, and you just lay that over the burn. You lay that over the burn, and what's another important part of your first aid kit... Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Sorry, I'm just very happy about that. Thought I'd lost it. Another important part of your first aid kit, and I'll explain why, is little plastic sheets. And the reason why plastic sheets, it might be plastic squares is probably a better way to say it. So when you're making up your first aid kit, you would cut them into little squares, because with the saturated Epsom salt solution, and you take the cloth squares and you might fold them over a few times and put them on the burn, then you put the plastic over that and then you bandage that on. So one of my daughters, she was ironing one day sitting down, and one of the children yelled out and it gave her a fright, and the iron fell on her thigh. In fact, there were circles where the steam had marked it, and she didn't have aloe, but she had Epsom salt. So she made a saturated Epsom salt solution, and she got cloth squares and just soaked it in and put that over the area. And she said she had about 4 layers, and it was quite wet, covered it with plastic and then bandaged it on. Now, burns are incredibly painful, especially steam burns. And she said it settled down within about 5-10 minutes. It settled down from a 10 out of 10 pain down to about a 5 out of 10 pain. And she said by the time she went to bed that night, it was down to about a 3 out of 10, which you can sleep with that. Do you know, today she's hardly got a mark. If you look at it carefully in the sunlight, it's a little bit whiter in a couple of areas. And yet that is what you would consider a fairly serious burn. It appears when there's a burn and there's that raw flesh that magnesium is lost very quickly. And the beauty of the Epsom salts is it's magnesium sulfate. And I think that that's one of the reasons why it is so helpful for burns. My choice for a burn is always aloe vera, but it's nice to have a few different choices because you may not always have aloe vera. But I think most people have Epsom salts. So the Epsom salts is good. So that might be another little, we'll put here if you have a little container of Epsom salts. And as I said, some people, if they go camping, they might already make up in a little screw jar, already make up their saturated Epsom salt solution. One lady said to me, I've got a jar in my fridge. She said, I've got kids. And if you've got kids, you've got accidents, you've got burns, and she said it's just there. And the beauty of having that in your fridge is that it's very cold. So the icy Epsom salts liquid straight on a burn can be incredibly refreshing. Some have used honey on burns, But I find that does not take the pain out as quickly as aloe vera or the saturated Epsom salt solution. So that it might surprise you to hear me suggest having Epsom salts as part of your first aid kit, but that's why, particularly for burns. And you'll have a little container of sodium bicarbonate. Sodium bicarbonate can be used with water for a soak if someone's had a wound, to soak it. And hopefully when you're camping you've got a little bowl. So as you can see, you don't need a very big first aid kit, because to me these are the most important things to have in a first aid kit. And I think it's a great idea to get the children to make their own first aid kits. You can go and buy little bottles, and they love putting all of that together themselves, and they might even have a few ideas of other things that they can put into the first aid kit. Back with charcoal, if someone has an upset stomach, after a meal, I know sometimes people are thirsty and they'll be drinking water. Probably it's not real clean water, and then a few hours later they got diarrhoea, then the charcoal can help with that. And if there's a cut, the cayenne-pepper, and I think everyone always has water, so it can be rinsed with water, and the iodine put on that. What about for a broken leg? Well, you've really got to get the helicopter in, or the but again, keeping them calm, and that's the lavender into here. The cayenne pepper capsules for pain killing, and having lots of bandages. Where is the bandage? There's this. Oh, I don't know who wrote that, but they didn't spell it right. So bandage. Bandage. So I think it's a good idea to always have several stretch bandages in your first aid kit for putting poultices on, for binding things, for even for a break. And if there's a break, you could use a couple of sticks until the helicopter arrives, and the cayenne pepper to calm them, to take the pain down, and the lavender essential oil to keep them calm. Tweezers for getting splinters out. Also tweezers for tick bites, and if you want to make sure it's, they're clean, then you can just put tea tree oil on them, or even iodine on them. Remember, necessity is the mother of invention. And living in the rainforest, I learned a lot of things that I had to do because of you're a long way from town. Another thing that I would put in my first aid kit is salt. And the best salt is the Baja salt, or the Celtic. And the reason why these two salts are the best salts is because they have approximately 82 minerals. Now, the reason why you've got salt in the first aid kit, and I don't know whether you're ever in an area where you get leeches. Is there any such thing as a leech in Holland? Maybe not. But we had a lot of rain once, and sometimes the leeches are on the trees, on the branches, and my little son William was only 2 and he got a leech on the eye. What are you going to do? And you can't pull it out because it's little, and when he closes his eye, it's over it. And every time I tried, he'd blink, and the leech is sort of slimy. It was only a tiny little thing. The leech was probably as big as a sunflower seed. And a friend of mine said there's only one thing you can do. You've got to put some salt on your thumb and wipe it across the eyeball, because you put salt on a leech and they'll immediately let go. And so I did, and it was very hard because I had to hold my little boy while I did this. And as soon as I did it, a spurt of blood spurted out of his eye. But I got the leech out. I was very glad that I got the leech out. And salt can be made into water, and salt water is an excellent disinfectant to put into a wound. It'll give a little sting, but not for long. So that can be used for scrapes or things like that. So you've got a few options there. So you don't need much salt, and if someone is very dehydrated, it's one of the quickest ways to hydrate them is to give them a pinch of salt and water, because what that salt does is that it pulls the water into the tissues. So the plastic square, you also want a couple of plastic bags. And the reason why plastic bags is if you've got a wound and you're dressing it, it's just something that'll be like a scrap bag to put the leftovers in. All of these things can be made and kept in your first aid kit. Now that's going to be a very different first aid kit to the first aid kit that most people have. So for my children, their first aid kit was about this big, and top down it was about this big. And so that allows for the little jars to be in there like this, and then you might have an area where you've got cloths, and you might have an area where you've got your bandages. But for the home, the first aid kit probably is a good idea for it to be about this big. And let's look down from above, you might have one area where you've got your cloths folded up. In fact, it's probably a good idea just, have a whole pile of cloths. Then you might have another area where you've got your plastics, and then might have a little container that's got scissors and tweezers and all that sort of thing in it. And then you've got, for the home first aid kit, your little bottles will be bigger. So we've got charcoal, we've got Epsom salts, we've got sodium bicarbonate, and then you've got your little essential oils there. And then you've got another area for your plastic bags, etc., etc. But for my children, their first aid kit was probably only about that big. So they don't need very much. And for the children, their first aid kit, I might not have the essential oils in there, a bit expensive, but the charcoal and the cayenne pepper, the basics there, were all that was needed. So we call it the ultimate first aid kit because that's about all you need. And I could be wrong, but I think I've just about covered everything. In fact, when you look back at our first aid kit, these two here are almost a first aid kit in one. So in my backpack that I travel everywhere with, I've always got cayenne pepper and I've always got charcoal. They're two things that I've always got just in my travelling backpack.